If you want to understand modern power, forget gold bars stacked in vaults or digital money flickering across screens. The real currency that built our world, our cities, our technologies, even our wars, is oil. A thick, dark, ancient liquid buried beneath deserts and oceans quietly became the single most important substance in human civilization. Oil didn't just fuel engines, it fueled empires. Before oil, nations fought over land, spices, ports, and mineral wealth. But when the internal combustion engine arrived, everything changed. One barrel of oil could produce the equivalent of 4.5 years of human labor. Overnight, oil became the ultimate multiplier of power, energy in its strongest, most portable form. Whoever controlled oil didn't just control wealth. They controlled time, speed, and possibility itself. By the early 20th century, the United States, Britain, and emerging global powers realized something critical. Controlling oil supply meant controlling the world economy. Cars, planes, factories, ships, agriculture, electricity. Every pillar of modern life became dependent on petroleum. It was no longer just a resource, it was a bloodstream. Oil shaped borders in the Middle East, toppled governments across continents, funded revolutions, and triggered wars disguised as liberation or national security. The countries sitting on vast oil fields were suddenly important, not because of their culture or diplomacy, but because of what lay under their sand. Today, 100 years later, oil still acts as the silent currency behind global dominance. Nations rise when they have access to cheap energy and fall when they lose it. The U.S. dollar, global trade, military reach. All of it is tied to this black liquid that powers everything from your phone's supply chain to the jet flying overhead. Oil isn't just fuel. It is the foundation of the modern empire. When people talk about American power, they mention the military, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, or Hollywood. But the real engine of U.S. dominance is something far less visible, the petrodollar system. It's not taught in schools, rarely explained on the news, yet it silently shapes every major geopolitical decision of the past 50 years. The story begins in 1971 when President Nixon ended the gold standard. Overnight, the U.S. dollar lost the backing that kept it stable, no more gold tied to the currency. The world panicked. If the dollar collapsed, America's global influence would collapse with it. So the U.S. created a new foundation for the dollar, oil. In the early 1970s, American officials struck a deal with Saudi Arabia, leader of OPEC and the world's most powerful oil exporter. The agreement was simple and world-changing. Every barrel of oil must be sold in U.S. dollars. No exceptions. In return, the U.S. would protect Saudi Arabia militarily and politically. This forced every nation, China, Japan, Europe, Africa, Latin America, to hold massive amounts of U.S. dollars just to buy energy. Suddenly, the dollar became the world's oxygen, and the U.S. controlled the tank. This system created three powerful effects. 1. Unlimited global demand for U.S. dollars, allowing America to print money without the economic collapse other nations face. 2. U.S. control over global energy flows, giving the U.S. leverage over allies and enemies alike. 3. Massive financial power, enabling the U.S. to fund wars, expand military bases, and maintain global influence with money other countries were forced to use. The petrodollar didn't just transform the U.S. economy, it created a global energy empire. And any nation that tried to escape it, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Venezuela, quickly discovered that the dollar isn't just a currency. It's a weapon. When people hear the phrase war for oil, it sounds like a cliché, an oversimplification. But history tells a different story. Oil has been the silent motive behind some of the most devastating conflicts of the past century. Not because nations openly admit it, but because energy is survival. And when survival is threatened, countries don't negotiate, they invade. During World War II, Japan didn't bomb Pearl Harbor because it hated America's ideology. It did it because the U.S. cut off Japan's oil supply. With only 18 months of fuel left, Japan had two choices: surrender its ambitions or wage war. It chose war. Germany, desperate for fuel, invaded the Soviet Union partly to seize the oil fields of the Caucasus. If Hitler had captured them, history may have unfolded very differently. Fast forward to the modern era, and the pattern continues. Iraq, Libya, Iran, Syria, these aren't random locations of conflict. They sit on some of the largest petroleum reserves in the world. And every time a leader in these regions tried to nationalize oil, change the currency it was sold in, or challenge the petrodollar system, they suddenly became enemies of democracy, freedom, or global security. Wars dressed as humanitarian missions often hide economic motives. When the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, the official reason was weapons of mass destruction. But no WMDs were ever found. What Iraq did have was 115 billion barrels of oil, the fifth largest reserve on Earth. And shortly before the invasion, Saddam Hussein began selling oil in euros instead of dollars, directly threatening U.S. financial dominance. Whether it's drone strikes, proxy wars, coups, or full-scale invasions, oil-rich nations face constant pressure. Their land becomes a chessboard where global powers compete, not for ideology, but for energy control. Because in the modern world, winning a war isn't about territory. It's about fuel. Oil didn't just power cars, planes, and factories. It powered an entirely new financial system. And this system quietly turned nations, corporations, and everyday people into long-term debtors. To understand modern economics, you must understand one truth. Energy and debt became partners, and together they built the invisible cage we live in today. It began with the petrodollar system. Once oil was priced in dollars, the U.S. needed a way to circulate trillions of those dollars through the global economy. Enter the banks. American and European financial institutions began lending money, massive amounts of it, to developing countries, promising growth, infrastructure, modernization. But hidden inside those loans were traps, variable interest rates, dollar-denominated debt, and repayment terms that guaranteed dependency. As long as oil stayed expensive, nations needed more dollars to buy it. So they borrowed more. And once you borrow from the global banking system, you never truly leave it. This is how countries like Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and dozens across Africa and Asia became locked in debt for generations. Their economies weren't allowed to grow freely. They were engineered to funnel money back into Western banks and energy corporations. But it wasn't just nations. The same model was applied at home in the U.S. Credit cards, mortgages, student loans, auto loans. The system created endless consumption powered by endless borrowing. Debt became normal, expected, even patriotic. The average American became intertwined with the same machinery that trapped entire countries. Oil ensured global demand for dollars. Debt ensured global obedience to the dollar. Together, they created a system where economic freedom is an illusion. Whether you're a nation struggling to service IMF loans or an American drowning in interest payments, the structure is the same: energy dependence, financial dependence, and a cycle you're not supposed to escape. The cage doesn't need walls. Debt is enough. Most Americans think of control as something physical: laws, prisons, surveillance. But the real prison of the modern world isn't made of steel bars. It's built from oil dependency, endless debt, and perpetual conflict, working together to shape every part of your life without you ever noticing. Start with oil. Every product you buy, every mile you drive, every supply chain that delivers food to your grocery store depends on petroleum. If oil stops, America stops. That dependence is the first wall of the cage. You can vote, protest, invest, but you cannot opt out of an energy system that powers everything from your electricity to your Amazon packages. The second wall is debt. Americans aren't encouraged to save. They're engineered to borrow. Mortgage debt, student loans, medical debt, credit card debt. Each one is a financial tether that keeps you tied to the system. The average American spends decades paying interest, not building wealth. It's not accidental. It's design. The third wall is permanent war. Not always boots on the ground, but a global military presence, foreign interventions, and geopolitical strategies that keep oil flowing and U.S. finance dominant. Every conflict justifies more government spending, more borrowing, and more dependency on the very institutions that profit from instability. War becomes an economic engine, not a last resort. Put these three walls together and you get a prison without guards. A system where you don't need to be forced, you're guided. where you don't rebel because you're distracted, indebted, overstimulated, and economically vulnerable. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a structure. A structure where oil fuels the machine, banks extract the wealth, and war keeps the machine secure. The modern prison is real. And the hardest part to accept is this. We built it, we live in it, and most people will never realize they are inside it.